Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Autism Athletic Podcast. I was going to do an interview with Philip Ironside, but I have to apologize for not being prepared as I had forgotten one of my cords to hook up my equipment. Before I begin, apologies to Coach Ironside and his family and whoever else would be listening to that episode. But today we are going to talk about the NFL draft, which is in April. I think it's April 25th, 26th, and 27th. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we're going to talk about specifically my top quarterback prospects for the draft. So here are my top 10 quarterback prospects for the draft, and I'll break them down. So first, I want to start with Shedeur Sanders. Now, I've gone back and forth whether I should have Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward number one, and you could talk me into either one, but I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders. He's got good enough size at 6'2". Some would say that's undersized. That's really kind of average in today's NFL, especially when you look at guys like Drew Brees is only 6 foot, and Bryce Young, who's only like 5'9", 5'10", and Kyler Murray's only like 5'9", 5'10", and Russ Wilson, who's 5'11". But I could go on and on and on. But 6'2" is really not bad. He's got elite accuracy, completing over 70% of his passes this year and completing like 68, 69% last year. He makes good decisions, and he's got very good mechanics, and he's consistent. And his O-line was not good at all, nor was his run game. Their defense at Colorado was okay. At times it wasn't great, but overall it wasn't bad. And his receiving core was great, but he's also a big reason why their receiving core played so great. He's just got smooth mechanics, nice delivery, comes out quick, good footwork. The only thing I don't like about him is he lacks elite physical tools. He's not a great runner, although he's better than he's given credit for, and he doesn't have elite arm strength, and maybe he at times he'll hold on to the ball just a tad too long, but for the most part he's got really good mechanics, and I really like his game. Do I think he's somebody that's going to be an elite quarterback in the NFL? Probably not, but he's definitely an above average quarterback. Some people are comparing him to Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a little better than that, but that's not a bad comparison, as neither had elite physical tools, but both were super accurate and good. And yes, his picks came up this year, but he still has almost basically a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio in his 2 years at Colorado, and he was up in just about every statistic this year: yards per attempt, passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, completion percentage. Team won more games. They went from 4 wins to 9 wins, if I'm not mistaken. So he's who I've got number one. Number two on my list, I've got quarterback Cam Ward from Miami. Now, you could talk me into him being number one, and it would not surprise me if he was a more productive NFL quarterback than Shedeur Sanders. I think his upside is a little better. While I don't think he has elite physical tools, I think he's got very good physical tools. I think his mobility, whether it be taking off and running or especially scrambling, is very, very good. And I think he's got good arm strength, and he is accurate and has good footwork. Now, if you look at his rushing numbers, like they won't like pop off the charts, but they're a whole lot better than Shedeur Sanders and a lot of prospects in this draft. Now, occasionally he'll try to play hero ball or do too much at times, but if you look at his interception numbers, he's really not that bad. He only threw 7 this year, but a lot of those were his fault. So that's one thing I would nitpick. And another thing I don't love is throwing motion. It's not bad when it comes out, but he just holds it a little low, which could lead to some strip sacks, especially in the NFL. And it means it takes like a half second longer for him to get his passes off. But other than that, I think he can be another solid NFL quarterback. I think he's definitely above average. Some people say he plays like Ben Roethlisberger. I don't know if I quite see that, and maybe that's like best case scenario. But I do see somebody, maybe not a top 5 quarterback ever in the NFL, but maybe he's somebody who could be a top 10 to 12 quarterback. And I think the same thing about Shedeur Sanders. Number 3 on my list, I have Jalen Milroe. Some people do not like Jalen Milroe that much as an NFL prospect, but I am a big fan of Jalen Milroe potential. I know he's got some work to do. His short intermediate accuracy could be better, and he threw a little more picks than you would like, especially considering that Alabama wasn't his team throwing it 35, 40 times. But he's got good arm strength. He's got a nice deep ball. He's got good enough size at 6'2", and he can flat out run. He's not going to be like Lamar Jackson was in college, where he's running for like 1,500 yards, or where he's having multiple 1,000-yard running seasons in the NFL, but he can be somebody that can give you 500-plus running yards in the NFL, and he can be somebody that can have double-digit rushing touchdowns in the NFL, kind of like a Jalen Hurts, where his rushing yards and yards per carry, they'll be solid, and they'll be good, maybe not quite, say, Lamar Jackson level, but as far as rushing touchdowns go, he could be one of the best. He had like 20 rushing touchdowns this past season, and double digits last year. He had some games where he just absolutely took over. Look at the Georgia game, both throwing and running, he took over, and he was good against South Carolina. Now, there were some bad games, like the bowl game he had. The game against Oklahoma, he was not very good, and Vanderbilt. So I get it. He definitely needs to work on his passing, and he definitely needs more consistency. But overall, I think he's got the potential to be good. In the right situation, I think he'll be good. Do I think he'll be a first round pick? Probably not. Maybe mid to late round, but I doubt it. But he could definitely be a second to third round pick. And I think in the right situation, he could develop and turn into a nice quarterback. Let him sit for a year or two. If I had to make a prediction, I think the Rams wouldn't be a bad choice. They did just lock up Matthew Stafford for a few more years, but they could use a backup quarterback given Matthew Stafford's age, and that would be a good person to learn from. Yeah, their playing styles are different, but he needs to work on his throwing, and Matthew Stafford is a good person to learn from. Number 4 on my list, one that a lot of people have rising on their draft boards is Jackson Dart. People really like his game. I do too. I don't think he has any like glaring weaknesses or anything like that. He's mobile. He's got good arm strength. He's got a nice deep ball, and he makes good decisions. The only thing I will say is I don't know that he does anything elite. And then a lot of his reads I feel like are RPO, which is run pass option, which means you have to decide whether to hand it off or to throw it, which can be tough because you're not just focused on throwing, you're focused on should I hand it off or not. But the problem with that is you're only making half field reads, I feel like. You're not reading the entire field. And that was kind of one of the criticisms people had about Bo Nix. Now, I don't think it's as much of a screen offense as Bo Nix is. I do think they push it on the field a little bit more. So from that perspective, I do think he's a better prospect in some ways, but in other ways not, just because of how insanely productive Bo Nix was and just how much experience he had. But back to Jackson Dart, I think he does several things well, and I think in the right situation, he could learn and develop into a good quarterback. I keep saying Rams, and I know there's other situations of older quarterbacks where you can sit and learn from, but Rams would be another good one. Or maybe even the Seahawks. And given how Geno Smith played this last season, if he needs to come in and take over Geno Smith's spot, he could probably be good enough to do that, especially if he sits and learns for several games. May not even have to sit for a full season. I like his game better than Jalen Milroe's right now, but I think the upside is just so good on Jalen Milroe. Then next on my list, I have Quinn Ewers. A lot of people aren't that sold on Quinn Ewers, and I'm not as sold as I was, say, last year. But what I like about his game is he got good enough size at 6'2". He's got a strong arm. Some people say he's got just an okay arm, but I think he's got one of the better arms in this draft. I don't think there's a quarterback in this draft with elite arm strength like, say, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Patrick Mahomes, that kind. But I think he's got good arm strength, and I think his short and intermediate accuracy are maybe the best in this draft, or at least right there with Shedeur Sanders. Now, the problem is, even though he's currently healthy, he does have a history of injuries, which is bad because that means he's either injuring the same body part over and over, which is not a good sign, or he's injuring multiple parts, which is not a good sign. Because I'm no medical doctor and I don't know what injuries he's had. And he has been playing with a brace. So you just wonder every time he steps onto the field if he's going to get hurt or not. So that's a problem. And then the lack of mobility, although I do think he's a tad more mobile than he's given credit for. And then just needs to work on the deep ball. It's just inconsistent, and he has a tendency to put too much air on it. And maybe that's why people say he doesn't have enough arm strength, but he can throw it far. This guy can sling it. I think in the right situation, he could be a solid quarterback too. Maybe not the upside of a Jalen Milroe, or maybe not the all-around game of a Jackson Dart, but as just a pure thrower, I think he can be every bit as good as those two. Then next on my list, I have Dylan Gabriel. Some people would have Will Howard, and some people have Will Howard even higher than that on my list. I've seen Will Howard as high as 3, but I have Dylan Gabriel. He's extremely experienced. He's got good enough mobility, and he's extremely accurate. Now, he kind of lacks elite arm strength and size, too. And he's a lefty, which lefties don't generally do great in the NFL for some reason. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if it's because you've got to completely, reverse your offense, if that makes sense. Like, you've got to run all your plays from the left side, like when you roll out and stuff, and the receivers aren't as used to it, or what, or if it's just a coincidence. But he does remind me of Tua in the sense that he's got decent mobility and is extremely accurate lefty. But that might be a stretch since Tua's a quality starter in this league. I do think Dylan Gabriel can be an excellent backup in this league. I don't know that he's a starter, though, just because he just lacks those elite physical tools, especially his size. But he's extremely experienced and accurate and has some mobility. Then next on my list, I have Will Howard, and he is climbing up higher on my list. You could talk me into higher than this. What I like about him is he's extremely accurate, had a high completion percentage on a high yards per attempt, too, meaning he was pushing the ball down the field, and they were getting a lot of yards every time, and they threw it. And he can run, too. Maybe he didn't run as much at Ohio State as he did at, say, Kansas State, but down the stretch, in the playoffs, he ran the ball extremely well, especially in that national championship game. Now, there's some things I didn't like about him. If you look at him at Kansas State, nobody was really thinking of him as an elite NFL prospect. Like, he wasn't bad at all, but he wasn't great either. And then he was not good in the Nebraska game, even though they won that game. That was way closer than it should have been, and their team just did not score many points. Had he played better, they should have blown them out. And he was terrible in that Michigan game, one of the craziest upsets of the year. But overall, he's got good numbers, and he was great when it mattered the most in the playoffs, and he's extremely accurate, and he's got good enough physical tools, and he's got good size at 6'3", 6'4", and he's experienced. And he's played in multiple offenses, which means he's used to learning new playbooks. Next on my list, I have Kyle McCord. Some people are high on Kyle McCord, or they kind of think of him as a sleeper. I'm not that crazy about him. At Ohio State, he took over for C.J. Stroud, and he was the worst quarterback Ohio State's had in a while. But that's kind of saying a lot because they've had some great quarterbacks lately, whether it be Stroud or Haskins or Fields or whoever it may be. They've had several good quarterbacks. And I like his size at 6'3", and he's very accurate, and he gets the ball out quickly. But he threw too many picks. He threw 12 this past year, and he threw 5 in one game. So I think his decision making could be a little better, and I think he's the least mobile quarterback in this draft. And I just think he's inconsistent. Do I think he'll be a quality back in the NFL? Probably, but I don't ever see him starting. I don't know. I'm not super flipped out over him, but he's better than the next prospect I have. Then next after him, I have Curtis Rourke. I'm not a big fan of Curtis Rourke. He's got the size at 6'4", 6'5". He's got good enough arm strength, okay mobility, more than Kyle McCord, and he's very, very accurate. But in the two biggest games he played, in the playoffs against Notre Dame and in the game against Ohio State, he was not good. He just folds when it comes to playing against better competition. I think he could have been a lot better against better competition. And because of that, I really don't like that about him. And his strength of schedule was pretty weak this year, to be completely honest with you. So maybe he'll be an okay backup, but I just think of him as kind of just a mediocre backup who'll get drafted maybe day 3. I don't know where on day 3, but it's probably like mid day 3, which is rounds 4 through 7. So probably around 5 or 6, if I had to guess. And last I have on my list, and he might be rising just a little bit. I don't think he's a great prospect, but I do think he's a little bit intriguing. And that's, I may be pronouncing this wrong, and no disrespect to him, but Tyler Shaw or Shook or however you say it, I'm not exactly sure. But he's the quarterback from Louisville. And what I like about his game is he's got good size at 6'4", 6'5", good enough mobility, and he can make some nice throws. Now, he's inconsistent, only completing about 63% of his passes, which is okay in today's NFL, and it's a better completion than, say, Lamar Jackson had in college, and it's not far off from Jalen Milroe, but that's not elite. And if you look at his overall numbers, they were just okay. And under pressure, he could be a lot better, and he was just really inconsistent. And his overall numbers were just kind of okay, and that's what I don't love about his game. But I do think he's rising. Wouldn't surprise me if he went ahead of Curtis Rourke. And then some other notable mentions I have is Riley Leonard, the quarterback from Notre Dame. His overall passing numbers weren't terrible, especially the interceptions. Only throwing about 7 or 8, which isn't bad. But his overall accuracy, while his completion percentage was okay, he just needs more consistency. He really struggles to push the ball down in the field, and that's part of the reason why he has a low yards per attempt throwing. But he's got good size at 6'4" and is very, very mobile. Maybe not Jalen Hurts mobile, but he's got very, very good mobility, whether it be taking off running or especially on designed runs. And you run that QB power where you just get him in the shotgun and just hand it off to him, and he's excellent in that. He can do read options, he can take off and run, and he's got good enough arm strength, and I like his size. Do I think he'll get drafted? I'm not sure. Wouldn't surprise me if he was a 6th or 7th round pick, but overall, he just needs way more consistency as a thrower, and I think he's just a project. Now, if you want to put him in like the UFL, the semi-pro league, he'll be excellent in there, but you put him in the NFL, and I think he might be good enough to make a roster, but I think he's at best a mediocre backup. And then I have Brady Cook from Missouri. I don't have a ton to say about him overall. He had decent size at 6'2", 6'3", good enough arm strength, and okay mobility. But overall, like statistically, he wasn't as good this year at Missouri, and his numbers weren't as good. And that's why I don't think Luther Burden had quite as good of a year this year. And overall, I think he's kind of another project, too. I just think he needs a lot more consistency. And then last, I have Seth Hannigan from Memphis. I don't have a ton about him either, but he was good. He was very productive in his time at Memphis. If you look at his stats this year, they weren't quite as good, but overall, he's been very productive. He's got solid size, good accuracy, and he's just another underrated prospect. Could be another sleeper to get late in the draft or even pick up as an undrafted free agent. Now, the level of competition playing in the American Athletic Conference wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst, but it definitely could have been better. But overall, those are who I have as my top 10 quarterbacks and 3 other notable ones for the 2025 NFL Draft. Comment with your predictions on where they'll go and what you think, and I won't take offense to anything. I would love to have a good QB debate. And thanks so much for listening, and I hope to have more episodes soon. Thank you.